So the first international perspective that we will bring is from Indonesia, and he was involved with our Fab Fest this year. So I think we already have Ben Koo ready and on the line. Let's see. So Ben is the Vice President of Research and Development at Suraya University. And he's going to speak to us about his approach to digital ecosystem, and this will bring this history and background as to how we've been working in our global network. Ben, over to you.
Yes.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you. I can start sharing my screen now, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Wonderful. Yes. This is Ben Koo from Bali, and I'm working with Doc Corley to present his presentation, and Doc is also online. Doc, can you say hello? And this is also with lots of suggestions from Mila Fiore and also Thomas Diaz. So just imagine, in terms of having a real digital ecosystem, that you truly know your data only belongs to you and nobody else, and you know the social impact or the economic value of your own data. But factually, most people probably know this is not the case, especially after we know that Berners-Lee introduced World Wide Web like almost 30 years ago. And now that we are literally in a situation where information are so difficult to make sense for everyone because it's just overwhelmed. And in this case, that when he created the so-called Solid or so-called INROP company as a project, he started proposing notion of having a device or some kind of technology to provide like an operating system, a data-centric operating system to personally store your private data records, and most importantly, run programs to process the data that owned by individual and only by you. That kind of technology definitely is a necessary thing, but 3 months ago, something much, much more shocking just came out to the world. As everybody probably know, that's ChatGPT. And ChatGPT as a so-called large language model or so-called generative pre-trained transformer actually provides a much higher information density to know data about the data itself more than individuals, any single human brain can possibly kind of infer and organize. On the other hand, this kind of capacity, if we were able to master it and allow us to truly run this kind of algorithm against our own personal data within our own personal device, that would be an ideal situation. But obviously that requires a lot of technical skills and also a lot of so-called insight into how to select data, to choose data in a way that you know the data you're training is compatible and mutually creating more data. And it turns out this kind of work is a lot of work and it shouldn't be done only by individual. Therefore, we created this thing called PKC, Personal Knowledge Container, to basically create a collection of software that helps to streamline all these processes. But clearly, at the core of this problem is the notion of data correctness. Are you going to be able to truly pick out and select the correct data so that you would not get inundated by bad input so that you have meaningful output, like the idea in digital ecosystem that you want to have production in and also not just garbage out. So it turns out in data, there's a very generic and very powerful and sound approach to classify data. That is classify data in terms of the physical meaning, in terms of the sequence or just called time. And roughly speaking, all data in terms of its so-called namespaces or technical standards can be classified into past, present, and future, or things happen in the past in terms of file, things you interact with you right in front of you in terms of web pages, and things that promise to be delivered to you as services. And they clearly have already very powerful and very generic industry standards. But it turns out to pick out the correctness of each of such previously mentioned data pieces, there is a mathematical framework called correct by design, or sometimes called Hoare triple. Just classify data in terms of past and future in terms of pre and post condition. And as long as every single computable piece of data or computable function is considered to be matching both pre and post condition, and data can be asserted to be correct within this kind of contractual statement. Obviously, this is a mouthful, therefore it shouldn't be thoroughly pushed to every single individual on earth who wants to use data. Therefore, to help to create this so-called digital ecosystem, that we thought about how to reduce the amount of time to enable average people to engage with the physical and social meaning of data by stating what are the required measurements to talk about and to actually verify and witness data correctness. That has three measures. That's called timeliness. Am I hungry right now? Within 10, 20 minutes bound or 2 or 3 hour bound. And then who is hungry or who said I'm hungry? That is accountability in terms of identity and address of the source of information. Lastly, is if somebody keeps saying that someone is hungry or not, that kind of information can be published into some kind of data log to be observed. So this kind of thing provides this physical meaning time, social meaning in terms of who is accountable, and also socially and physically meaningful by having a long history of data that's shared across a large amount of people. So that a digital ecosystem in the implementation of PKC helps to lower the entry barrier to enable everybody to have a correctness verification procedure running in a tool that is bound by individual ownership of data, so-called data appliances. So this appliance should be able to timestamp the individual logical statement or so-called operational activities or events in terms of standardized form. And all the data should be automatically cryptographically verified associated with a specific source in terms of authorized or authenticated accounts. Lastly, the data needs to be published to some kind of immutable data log that is encrypted so that only authorized persons or organization can have observability. So to quickly kind of show you one possible implementation, on the left-hand side, you see this thing called logic model is actually an implemented form in MediaWiki that you can easily click on a hyperlink to write humanly readable text to specify the so-called given spatial, temporal, physical context of certain event. And then when certain process happen, then you can have output with the consequences given the execution of certain process. This type of linguistic encoding in regular human language can also be implemented by this programming language called Zenroom. I know that this is funded by the Interfacer EU project, that it provides the cryptographic and most importantly, the core triple-like, the subject predicate object in terms of given, when, and then kind of structure to encode every single piece of data in terms of time, in terms of cryptographically traceable events, and most importantly, that this thing can be registered on the public data log, such as blockchain of different kinds, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. So that PKC as an operating system really is a collection of microservices running within your own personally controlled data appliances that can run any kind of open source programs packaged in terms of, let's say, Dockerized containers. But the important idea is that it will be able to leverage the publicly available time, which is blockchain providing the timestamp, and also the publicly available data log, which is roughly speaking something like Ethereum Etherscan, to allow information to be observable so that we will have a public infrastructure to truly allow both private ownership of running this kind of correctness verification checkup procedures, at the same time have a common consistent time to associate so-called event ordering, and also have the way to trace them in the public data log. So that's what we meant by having a thorough ecosystem. However, a digital ecosystem cannot possibly be a true egalitarian ecosystem until the participants understand the meaning of correctness, the meaning of this logic model, the meaning of how to write this kind of truthful statement in a form that is already kind of understood by a large public. Therefore, the proper organization of curriculum and teaching people about the basic idea of what is time, what is ordering, what does it mean to have something to be published in public data log would need to be in public and elementary education. And that's why we built PKC for. We built PKC as an open source implementation to allow this kind of pedagogical tool to be taught and used by resource constrained individuals and organizations. And clearly, the notion of data is so powerful and so useful that it needs also to be protected by law, like GDPR and age-appropriate design code that is practiced and issued in national and regional laws. But these laws need to be constantly re-examined based on emerging new technologies, following the same kind of correctness assertions as the way I mentioned earlier to check the correctness of the laws themselves. On the other hand, this type of correctness idea needs to even be taught to not just school kids, but even to lawyers. So that last 2 days, I think I have successfully convinced this. This is actually the Presidential Scholarship of Indonesia. These 100 some odd young students are the top academic performers of Indonesia. They are currently living in Bali for a whole year to prepare for their eventual future studies. But in this year, we convinced them that we will have these people practice to use PKC and also try to reach out to the 17,000 islands around Indonesia to teach their own peers in their own age group and in their own contextual society to actually reach out to have a better literacy about what is data correctness with proper automated instrumentation. So at the end, I want to call everyone to action that to have a true digital ecosystem, PKC is the kind of necessary instrument to assign physical and social meaning in an observable and in an objective way. But you obviously need the proper technical instrument, both in terms of software and in terms of the proper intellectual and logical understanding, which is the understanding about correctness. And thanks to Zenroom, a project funded by EU Interfacer, that it has a range of blockchain database and services that can already be store all these kind of public data log for PKC. And then we definitely hope that every school around the world could actually accept this kind of new curriculum that lead data literacy, the understanding of a adequate procedure to check data correctness and having the instruments to do such a thing. And recently, the Ministry of Indonesian Internal Affairs has just allowed us to basically deploy all these ideas to all of the 500 kabupatens or so-called counties around Indonesia, the 17,000 islands. So at the end, I want to mention that right now, IEEE Standards Association is also looking into having PKC, how its basic idea of how to frame the procedure and instrument to standardize the knowledge tokens as a kind of data content in terms of logic models could be used as an international standardization. Therefore, we can truly build a global digital ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you so much for being awake at this hour. I think in Indonesia, you're very much past your bedtime, so we appreciate very much you joining us today. So Ben, as we said, has been part of our summit, which happened in Bali at the Bali Fab Fest, and he brought these ideas to us and to our community, and these have been also kind of swimming around with the other platforms that we have been aware of over the years. So thank you very much, Ben.